to another night at the Velvet Note. That's as close as you're going to get to the Tamara Fuller introduction from me. Tamara is out of town. Tamara's out of town tonight, so I'm going to fill in. Tonight we're going to do the music of Norman Granz, not the music of Norman Granz. Well, yeah, I guess really the music. As most of you know who have come here before, what we like to do is not only feature musicians who have obviously impacted jazz and American music, but also feature some people, we did Panonica before, some people who've impacted that didn't play an instrument. And Norman Granz is one of those. We're going to get into a lot of that. Before we do, I'm going to tell you all about what's coming up next, because a lot of people here probably knows that this was the one that was rescheduled. So our new series actually starts in 2 weeks. Our first, I'll read them off to you. On October 23rd, we're going to kick off the new 6-month series, and we're going to do an entire night of the album "Kind of Blue" by Miles Davis. So that'll be a fun one. After that, November 13th, we're going to do the music of Stan Getz, one of my favorites. December 4th, we're going to do actually somebody who is from Atlanta, a great kind of unsung jazz composer and pianist by the name of Duke Peterson. So that one will be fun. When we go into January, we'll do the saxophone. A great saxophonist on January 22nd will be Benny Golson. February 12th, we're going to do the music of George Gershwin. And then we're going to close out this 6-month series on March 19th with the music of Ben Webster. So, but tonight is about Norman Granz. Joining us on the acoustic bass, he's with us usually most of these nights. He's probably the one who's talking back there, and I'm trying to talk over. Please help me welcome Mr. Kevin Smith. Joining us on piano tonight, great pianist. He's played with us a whole bunch before. He'll play with us a whole bunch more times. Please help me welcome Mr. Louis Hurvo. And as always, joining us on tenor saxophone, please help me welcome Mr. John Sanford. That's so weird that John was dominating the conversation back then. So I'm not used to that. All right, so as usual, we're going to get started with some music, and then we'll talk about Mr. Granz in just a minute. Thank you all so much. Great standard entitled On the Sunny Side of the Street. That is a tune, our version that we just did there is a little homage to a version that was on a great record entitled Sunny Side Up, which featured Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, and Sonny Stitt, a great trio of horn players out front. It's a great album. There's a lot of magic that happens when you get those kind of musicians together, and that pretty much sums up what Norman Granz was able to do. It was collect these great musicians and put them in opportunities to make magic and then spread that around. That album came out in 1957. That's a very important year for Norman Granz, which we'll come back to later. But that, to me, is like a great way to start off the concert, because that album and that song is just filled with joy and swing, and that's a lot of what Norman was able to bring. Now, Norman doesn't play an instrument, so we're going to talk about how he got into this position in the first place. He was born in 1918. His parents were Jewish immigrants that moved over. They lived a little outside of Los Angeles. He was born there. He was actually, he had his sights set on becoming a movie filmmaker. He was studying while he was there, in Los Angeles. And somewhere along that path, he started to see, notice more and more situations where desegregation was not moving fast enough. And it really got to him. So what he decided to do is he put these little jam sessions together at a local Los Angeles club, but it had to be a desegregated jam session. So the musicians, the audience, everybody had to be desegregated. And he was going to try and do something through jazz to kind of help that out socially. So the first couple he did were really well attended. They were a lot of fun, and so he decided to kind of see if he could expand on this. So in 1944, he's going to go to the Philharmonic Theater in California and ask if he could put on one of these kind of all-star jam sessions. And he does. He puts it on. Same thing. Make sure that across the board. The bathrooms are desegregated, the tickets are desegregated, and the musicians on the stage are also reflect that. And what he didn't really expect was it was a huge success. It was sold out. Everybody flocked to it, and it really kind of empowered him to try and take the next step. So what he decided to do is take what money he had left and put it into a tour. So he put a group together and decided to tour up the West Coast. They went all the way up. They went through Seattle. They went all the way up into Canada. When they got to Canada, he ran out of money. So the tour was supposed to last longer, but basically he ran out of money. But so he actually had to pawn several of his personal belongings just to get the musicians back home. But when he finally got back home, beyond broke, basically, he actually didn't feel dismayed. He felt energized, electrified. He had found what he thought was his calling. He was going to help move our country along through our unified love of, particularly back then, this great American art form that was still immensely popular. So he's going to get that role in the Jazz at the Philharmonic, as it was called, because of the Philharmonic Theater, but he's going to keep that name. He's going to start trying to put together more tours, more club dates, etc., and build on that. One of the first artists he kind of latched onto that played most of them. Now he had people like Nat King Cole. He had all sorts of superstars who want to be involved in this. But one of the early ones that kind of helped lift him up and became a little bit of a bedrock for him was a great alto saxophonist and trumpet player by the name of Benny Carter. And this is really where Norman starts to cut his teeth, not only as a concert promoter, but now he's going to start diving into being a record producer. So he's going to start producing some records for Benny Carter. And so one of the songs that he would play often throughout his entire time as the promoter for jazz at the Philharmonic, he liked people to jam out on one of Benny Carter's most popular tune, a beautiful tune entitled When Lights Are Low. And so we're going to honor Norman and Benny Carter by doing our version of When Lights Are Low. One, two, three, four. I don't know, it just like just came right off there.
It's a setup.
Okay, there we go. All right, technical difficulties. When lights are low. So that was, he got this really rolling in, like I said, in 1944, and it's going to slowly but surely pick up steam. Things are really going to change around 1948, and things are going to completely start taking off for him. There were two important meetings he would have that would basically change kind of jazz as we know it in terms of the classic jazz that we all kind of put on the radio. He's going to find himself, this is 1948, he's going to find himself in Canada yet again, this time a little bit better luck. And he's also, instead of being on the west coast of Canada, he's over on the east coast of Canada. He's in a cab, he's heading to the airport to fly back, I believe to New York, and he's flying to New York. He is flying to New York. And the cab driver has just a local radio station on. There's like a local radio station playing this pianist, like a little local hour jazz thing. And Norman is blown away by what he's hearing. He cannot believe the sound of this piano player. So he asked the cab driver, like, who is that? It's like, I don't know, it's just some, like, they're actually playing down at the local radio station right now. It's like being broadcast from, and so he pays the cab driver to head back and cancels his flight. He goes to the radio station and he meets a very young Oscar Peterson. And he says, man, you have to let me work with you. Like, I can put you on all these records. I do this thing called Jazz at the Philharmonic. And so he brought Oscar to a big performance. It was Jazz at the Philharmonic in Carnegie Hall. This was Oscar's introduction to the jazz world. Is immediately he goes from the local radio station in Montreal to Carnegie Hall. But he shows up, he plays, he impresses everybody. Everybody falls in love with him, and that begins a long standing relationship with Norman and Oscar, where he's going to manage Oscar's career. He's going to book Oscar on all of these Jazz at the Philharmonic shows. He's basically going to become his pianist for all of these shows, all these records he's going to produce. So many Norman Granz records. If you listen to, if you, I was going to say flip the CD back over, but just bear with me. Imagine if you will, it's 1997. Okay, you just went to Tower Records, went to the jazz section. You're thumbing through. The record happens to be in Norman Granz production. You turn it over, more than likely it's going to be Oscar Peterson on piano. So. Those two are going to have a long career together, and pretty much all of Oscar's classic jazz albums that we all know and love, that you would hear on the radio today, were produced by Norman Granz. My favorite of all of those records is a record entitled Night Train. And if you haven't checked out a bunch of Oscar Peterson or heard him at all, go get Oscar Peterson's Night Train. It's a great record. And one of the songs, I think it's the second song off that record we're going to do for you right now. It was a little tip of the cap to Duke Ellington, one of, I almost put this back on this thing, but I'm probably not going to. It was one of Oscar Peterson's, record, favorite jazz pianists. This is entitled Cgm Blues. Help. You get a manager? All right, here we go. Yeah. Thank you all so much. Cgm Blues. Again, that was off of Oscar Peterson's Night Train. So in 1949, the same year that he got Oscar to debut on the Jazz at the Philharmonic concerts, he also got a fairly unknown, signed to a small record label, once almost a star, and then kind of faded away with the big band era singer by the name of Ella Fitzgerald. So he's going to get her on the concert, and this is the late 40s, so well after Chick Webb, the Chick Webb Orchestra, and she had a career, but she was mainly known in the inner jazz circles. And when Norman heard her on the concert and saw not only what a great voice she had, but also what an impeccable musician she was able to mix it up with all the musicians up on stage. She could improvise with the best saxophone players on the stage. He said, more people have to know who you are. You are this amazing talent, and I want to do more with you. And she says, well, I appreciate that. I have a manager, and I have a record label, and so there's not a whole lot I can do about those things. And he was very clear that he didn't want to get anybody fired or have her sneak out of her contract. He said, well, okay, so we can't do any of that, but what I would like to do at least is hire you a bunch to do these Jazz at the Philharmonic concerts. So that happened, and her career started to build up a little bit, and he decided to bide his time. And then on a flight back from a European version of Jazz at the Philharmonic, he sat next to her and said, okay, it's been a couple of years. I know that your contract with your current manager runs out this December, and I would like to manage you, and I would like to sign you to my new label called Verve Records, which we'll get into shortly. And she said, okay, let's see how this goes. And she was like, so where do I sign? What are the deals of the agreement? And he says, no contract. I don't want you to work with me if you don't want to work with me. So we'll just do this as long as we can. And when you're sick of having me manage you, just say that's it, and we'll walk away. Same with the record contract. I'm not going to force you to make any records you don't want to make. And Ella said, okay, that's fair. So in that January, in 1956, their career started, and it basically ran for about 35 to 40 years without a contract, which is pretty crazy in this business. That wasn't the only person he didn't have a contract with. He didn't have a contract with Oscar Peterson. And Oscar had an even lengthier professional relationship with Norman. And that was basically the word on Norman, is that all of the musicians, speaking of all the musicians, all the musicians were just thought the world of Norman. He treated them all fairly. There was, Buddy Rich, who worked with Norman a bunch at the Jazz at the Philharmonic. He's known for being let's call him ornery, shall we? Let's say Buddy Rich was known to be ornery. and demanding. And he said, he goes, I swear to this, no one had a crossword to say about Norman Granz. Like we would travel all over Europe, and he goes, and he said, like, to a man and to a woman, every gig was fun. There was never a crossword. It was just, it literally felt like jazz heaven working for Norman Granz. So with Ella basically at his side, he wanted to rebuild Ella's career and have her sing songs that everybody already knew, more popular songs. So he created a series on his new jazz label called Verve Records, called the Songbook series. And so the first thing he did is he gave Ella a whole bunch of Cole Porter songs. And that was the first record they released. It's called Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Cole Porter Songbook. And it was a huge success, and it really helped catapult Ella's career. He would do a string of these songbook albums, not only with Ella, but other artists. And then he started to compare Ella with other people. And what ended up being the perfect pairing, and you know, of course it makes perfect sense to us now, but I don't know why it hadn't happened at this point, was he decided to pair Ella with Louis Armstrong. And they did a couple of records there. They're called Ella and Louis, just simple as that. Ella and Louis. There's that famous album cover. They're both like sitting, just like literally sitting on a chair, like looking at the camera. Like, is that the album cover picture? Okay, that's it. Have you guys taken it yet? Is there something in my teeth? Okay. So, but the record is incredible. We're gonna do one of my favorite tunes off of that Ella and Louis record for you right now. It's a great tune entitled "They Can't Take That Away From Me." And what I love about what Norman did is, this tune is normally played a little on the faster side, and it can be like a little, almost like, you know, like happy and, you know, like a little happy-go-lucky, if you will. But he slows it down a little bit, and it really kind of taps into the romantic part of it. And if you haven't heard Ella and Louis sing this on your drive home, make sure you do. I almost put this back in the microphone stand, Kevin.
Do it. Yeah, do it. Let's see. Danger. You can do it.
I shouldn't. Okay. Here we go. They can't take that away from me. Can't take that away from me. Yeah, they had two, I think they probably had more than that, but the two main ones are they did two Louis and Ella records. They're fantastic. And the sound of the jam session kind of mentality that was on these Jazz at the Philharmonic, that's intentional. It's meant to be loose and relaxed and to be very conversational and have everybody just kind of sit back in their chair and relax and enjoy themselves. And you can really hear that on that Ella and Louis record. You can hear them banter back and forth on the track and crack each other up. It's like it's one of my favorite, or both of those are two of my favorite jazz records of all time. So check those out if you haven't yet. I'd mentioned that he basically got all this started because he wanted to fight desegregation. So he wanted to fight segregation. And so to do that, he was putting these jazz concerts together, and he would use the power of them to just little at a time. First of all, just the idea that black and white patrons could be in the same building to watch these musicians, what was big, to help spread the gospel of jazz, if you will, around the country and the world. See these great black artists up there showing off their genius, and that went a long way. But he didn't just do that. He did a lot of things kind of behind the scenes. When he would go to a place that had whites only signs for bathrooms, whatever, he would always go around and take those down. Like right before the concert started, there'd be sections that would say whites only over here, and he would have somebody go like remove those signs so when people came in, there was no like whites only place. He had a lot of people that would book him, book the concert, and then he would tell them after it was booked, here's the deal, we are not going to play unless everyone is allowed to come to this venue. That would cost him a lot of money at times, and also it would break that barrier for some cities and some venues. The biggest one he broke was Las Vegas. For those of you who were here for our Nat King Cole show that we did a couple years ago, we talked about the trouble that Nat had going to huge megastar Nat King Cole and has to enter the casino that he has sold out through the service entrance and is not allowed to go onto the floor. Well, it was Norman Granz, among other people, that helped break that. He fought hard for that. Oscar Peterson has a great story. He would also do that. There was a couple of them that were trying to get a cab, and the cab driver, once they got in, the cab driver refused to take the fare. And Norman got in his face. They had a whole thing. The cops were called, and Oscar says that the story is he is yelling at the police officer and the cab driver while the police officer has a loaded revolver jammed in his stomach, and still Norman doesn't stop. He's just like all fired up about it. And that's one of the things that Oscar and Nat King Cole and Louis Armstrong and you name it all loved and respected. Respected about him is that he fought that fight from the beginning of him starting this all the way to the end, and he helped make a lot of inroads. He also fought for equal pay for black musicians, which was not a common thing in the 40s and 50s. He would demand that Ella Fitzgerald make the same money at a venue that a much lesser known white male singer would have made at that venue. He would say, well, you paid this, Tommy Two-Tone over here, $5,000. You're going to pay Ella Fitzgerald at least that much. He did a lot of that as well. He would also do it on his records and his shows. Often he would make sure that the band was some combination of mixed race up there, so you were seeing what he thought it should be, which is us all mixed up together. So he did a lot of great work, and that was really the catalyst for this. It just so happened that we got just a mountain of great music out of that. So now we're going to do a tune. This tune is one of my favorite. We talked about pairing people together. He paired Louis Armstrong with the Oscar Peterson Trio, and they did a great record called I think it's called Oscar Peterson Meets Louis Armstrong. And this was on his Verve label at the time. Before Verve, he had 3 other record labels that he ran actually simultaneously. One was called Clef Records. This is in the late 40s into the mid 50s. Clef Records was for his mainstream jazz. Down Home Records was strictly for New Orleans jazz. And then he had a record company called Norgran, which was for all of his more modern artists. So he had a record label for each of those. He finally basically traded all that in and created his own record label called Verve Records in 1956. He's obviously going to get Oscar Peterson and Ella Fitzgerald on there. In 1957, I mentioned that first song we did, Sunny Side of the Street, the record was recorded in 1957. In 1957, Norman Granz produced 50 albums, most of which you've heard of. This record we're about to play now, there's a whole bunch of great records he did. 50 albums in a year. I mean, he's literally doing nothing but producing, basically produced an album a week, which is pretty impressive. And so much of the sound that we might think of as classic jazz, and you can probably hear it in the songs we're playing tonight. A lot of that comes right out of the mind and the ears of Norman Granz. So we're going to do my favorite cut off of that Oscar Peterson and Louis Armstrong track. It's entitled "Let's Fall in Love." Thank you all so much. So, this is now, he's in his in the mid 50s into the late 50s, the height of Verve Records. Tons and tons of music is coming out. And then in 1959, probably from overworking himself, he decides, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and sell Verve Records. He's going to sell Verve Records to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. And as part of the contract, he's going to sell the entire catalog to them. As part of the contract, so that MGM doesn't have direct competition, because basically whatever Norman Granz does next will obviously also blow up, it's signed that he's not allowed to start a new record label or produce records for the next 7 years, so that MGM can enjoy their new purchase, basically. Well, so what he did... Spoiler alert. So he moves to Switzerland, So he's going to move to Switzerland. He's going to hang out in Switzerland, and he's trying not to do anything. But so here's what he figured out. He decided that he could still promote and do stuff as long as it wasn't jazz. So he starts promoting concerts for Santana and the Mothers of Invention and all these like 70s like prog rock concerts. Norman Granz, he's like, yeah, no, Louis Armstrong, go ahead. And, you know, like, how do you go from that to the? But again, he couldn't leave well enough alone. So he found a little workaround there. So he's going to live in Switzerland. He's going to promote all these rock concerts. As much as he loves jazz, he also loves art and painting, and he's going to start collecting artwork. He really gets into that, and eventually strikes up a relationship. Now, this is a guy who already knows Louis Armstrong and Nat King Cole and Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra and you name it, Duke Ellington. But he's eventually going to strike up a friendship with Pablo Picasso. So he and Picasso are going to become fast friends, eventually, all of that leads to that hiatus finally going away. He gets the itch again. He decides to create another record company. This is in 1978. He's going to create a brand new record company. Sorry, 1976, I think. 1974. One of the 70s. I wasn't born then, so I don't know. I wasn't around for that.
They don't remember either.
In 1842, he opened up a new record label. All right. So, but the record label is aptly titled Pablo Records. A little shout out to his. Did you just go? Oh, yeah. Now you know. See, the more you know. Okay. It's called Pablo Records. He's going to get back into the game. In 1977, he's going to produce a live album for Oscar Peterson, which is going to earn him a Grammy. What's cool about that is Oscar won the Grammy and then immediately turned around and just handed it to Norman as a thank you. It basically said, this was your idea, you picked the tunes and all that. Norman's process with working with artists was great. He came in, he wanted to handle every aspect. Pick the studio, pick the musicians, these are the songs we're gonna do. He had all of that where he was really organized and had everything down exactly the way he wanted it. But this is the important piece that a lot of people who might enter some sort of avenue with that approach is he'd have all of that laid out exactly as he wanted it. And he had zero problem anytime the artist said, I don't really want to do that tune, or actually can we do this, or do you mind if I bring this person in? So he always had a very complete plan, but never had an ego in terms of changing his mind, because he said, I'm doing all this, I'm trying to just put the artist in the best possible position. And if they want to change something, they can change something. I'm sure that went a long way in getting all those great musicians to work well with him. I'm not that way with my band. If they suggest stuff, for the most part, it usually gets them reprimanded of some sort, in some sort of fashion or other. So I do not take after Norman Granz. Part of what made Verve so great was this ability to bring the heart and soul of jazz, kind of what we all love about jazz, but put it in a package that anyone could listen to. Those records, they sound great, they're fun to listen to. None of the songs go on too long. There's lots of lyrics, but all the good parts of jazz, the swing and the conversation and the blues, all that's on those records. He used the songbook tactic to draw in people who have heard these songs from 20 or 30 years ago. And he also did that thing where he would pair the number of people he paired together, it's pretty crazy. Ben Webster and Stan Getz and Louis Armstrong and just all these great artists. One of my favorite pairings was when he put Ella Fitzgerald with Duke Ellington. He brought in Duke Ellington's orchestra, it was a great matchup, at least personally and on paper. Problem was when they got there, Duke and Billy Strayhorn they stopped in mid-tour for one date to make this record, and then they went right back out. And basically, they just, Duke and Billy didn't have anything prepared. They just came and all right, what are we doing? What songs are you singing? And I was like, wait, you don't have arrangements? He goes, no, I thought you had the arrangements. So, but Norman was able to kind of hold it together, and obviously Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn and Ella Fitzgerald, They all loved each other and had a great relationship, so it all worked out. But you can find these recordings of them like rehearsing and all these false takes because the band has no idea what they're supposed to be doing. However, the result is still pretty magical. So we're going to do one of my favorite tunes off of the record that Ella did with Duke Ellington. It's a great Duke Ellington tune. Doesn't get played enough, I think. It's called I Ain't Got Nothing But the Blues.
Oh, I did, yeah.
That's not the song we're going to do right now. We're almost going to do that song.
You were talking about veto as the second.
Well, that's true. Well, am I vetoing myself here? I think I'm vetoing myself. We're going to get to I Ain't Got Nothing But the Blues. I ain't got nothing but a set list that I'm not looking at over here. Back to Pablo Records. See, I'm going to bring it back around. I'm going to land this plane. Don't worry, John. Yeah. Sanford's always gunning for my job. He's always like, can you give that microphone for 1 second? So, but while he was with Pablo Records, he also helped lengthen a lot of great jazz artists who were popular in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Now it's the late 70s going into the 80s. Rarely do you hear this stuff on radio stations anymore. Even jazz itself has turned into more fusion and rock-based stuff. And so the idea that he was able to get Oscar Peterson a Grammy in a jazz category that had almost no traditional jazz left was amazing. He also helped lengthen and kind of revive the great Sarah Vaughan. He's going to do a couple of records with Sarah Vaughan. My favorite of those records, the album is entitled How Long Has This Been Going On? And we're going to do the title track from that right now. And that's actually going to feature Louis and John doing a nice duet of How Long Has This Been Going On? John Sanford, U.S. Senator. So I'm going to let you all in on something you guys, well, certainly nobody in this room knows this, so this will be the first you've heard of it. But did you know that Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald did an album together? They got in the studio, blah, blah, blah. They didn't have the charts together. Duke flew out the next day. So here is I Ain't Got Nothing But the Blues. you see why I was trying to get to that song earlier. I couldn't wait to get to that one. So, basically, once Norman Granz moves over to Switzerland, shock you, but he was like, oh, this place is kind of nice. I think I'll hang out here. So he's basically going to spend most of the rest of his life in Switzerland. He's going to run Pablo Records for a while. That's going to build up, and then he's going to sell it again. And at that point, then he's basically going to retire. He lives out the rest of his life till he passes away in 2001. He passed away in Geneva, Switzerland. He's way nicer than where I grew up, that's for sure. And it was actually on his, basically on his deathbed as the doctors and nurses are taking care of him. He has a record player in there, and he's playing them one of probably the record he's most proud of. I mean, he did so many records. We've talked about all these amazing, gigantic stars that he worked with. And what's pretty cool is, he found, this is in the 50s, well past Louis Armstrong's prime, or so everyone thought. Louis Armstrong was essentially an afterthought in the 50s. But he kind of reinvigorated his career. All these great jazz artists from the 40s and 50s whose careers started to lose some steam in the 70s and 80s as the cultures changed. He helped kind of lengthen and revive their careers. He did something really cool. Before the great Art Tatum passed away, he was like, we only have a handful of recordings of Art Tatum. So he paid Art Tatum to go into the recording studio, and he spent, I think, 2 or 3 days, and basically Norman just let the tape run, and Art Tatum just played song at one take of each, just song after song after song after song. So we have this massive collection of the great Art Tatum, because a lot of the great Art Tatum, like his prime, most of that wasn't recorded. So he was not only helping revive older jazz. He certainly brought jazz, revived jazz in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and then obviously kept it going for a long time. But the record he was most proud of was when he got a chance to work with Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker had for years wanted to record an album with an orchestra, and it was Norman Granz who helped put that together. It's a beautiful record entitled Charlie Parker, or Bird. It's called Bird with Strings. It's a great record, and that's the record he plays basically as he passes away, and all the doctors and nurses are taking care of him. So it's an amazing life, and he's done so much for American culture and American music. And it's pretty cool because he didn't play an instrument. He didn't sing, he didn't play piano, none of that stuff. But yet he still had a profound impact on the great American songbook and jazz as a whole as an art form. We're going to close it out with one more tune. Please help me thank one more time Mr. John Sanford on the tenor saxophone. Mr. Louis Hurribo on piano. Mr. Kevin Smith on the bass. He had many songs that he had multiple artists record and play at these jazz at the Philharmonic concerts. We're going to close it out with one that he would close a lot of his concerts out with, because it was a lot of fun for musicians to play. So we're going to close it out with a great Harold Arlen tune entitled My Shining Hour. Thanks so much. John Sanford, Louis Herbo, Kevin Smith. My name is Justin Barnes. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday evenings with us. We really cannot thank you enough. We're back here on October 23rd. We got a whole new series coming up. Hope to see you guys there. Have a great night.
Down. smooth